22. The inspection period. Repairs, BINSR, and the second negotiation. Thursday afternoon. Sarah's phone rings. It's Daniel. David finished the inspection. There are a few things he wants to address. Sarah looks at the calendar. The Reynolds property has been under contract only a short time, and Mike is already talking as if closing is guaranteed. Sarah knows better. The inspection period is often where sellers discover that getting an offer accepted was only the first negotiation. David hired Tom Alvarez, an Arizona home inspector, to inspect the property. Tom spent several hours at the house, reviewing its visible and accessible systems and components within the scope of his inspection. By the time he finishes, David has a lengthy report filled with photographs, observations, recommendations, and items he may want to investigate further. Mike sees the report and immediately says, 38 pages? There's no way 38 pages of things are wrong with my house. That's a common seller reaction. An inspection report isn't necessarily 38 pages of defects requiring 38 repairs. Inspectors document observations and information according to the scope of their work. The buyer then evaluates what matters to the buyer and exercises the rights available under the purchase contract. Sarah's job isn't to argue with Tom's inspection report. She also shouldn't become an inspector herself. David's concerns eventually narrowed to several items. Tom noted an issue involving roof flashing, recommended evaluation or servicing of the HVAC system, identified a leaking bathroom fixture, noted an electrical concern, and documented evidence of moisture near the upstairs window. That last item gets Sarah's attention. Remember the monsoon from section 17? Jennifer had already told Sarah that they noticed moisture near that window after the storm. Now the buyer's inspector has independently observed evidence of moisture in the same area. This is why transaction events don't exist in separate little boxes. Inspection and disclosure can overlap. Sarah should not tell Mike, "Don't worry about it. The buyer found it himself, so we don't need to address it." Information concerning a property condition may remain important, even when the buyer discovers it independently. Daniel sends Sarah David's inspection notice using the applicable transaction documents. For our course, we're using the Arizona Realtors BINSR as an example because Arizona agents commonly encounter it in residential resale transactions. But remember, the form doesn't replace understanding the contract. The parties' rights come from the agreement they actually signed. Mike reads David's requests. Fix the roof flashing, service the AC, repair the bathroom leak, correct the electrical issue, and address the moisture around the upstairs window. Mike looks at Sarah. Just tell him we'll fix everything. Not so fast. Before promising repairs, Sarah wants Mike and Jennifer to understand exactly what they may be agreeing to. Suppose Mike agrees to repair HVAC. What does that mean? Does it mean servicing the unit? Replacing one component? Correcting the specific condition identified by the inspector? Replacing the entire system? If David believes repair HVAC means one thing and Mike believes it means something else, they may discover that disagreement during the final walkthrough, when everyone is days away from closing. Clear language matters. The same problem exists with fixed roof. Mike may believe replacing a small section of flashing satisfies the agreement. David may expect a licensed roofing contractor to perform broader work. Sarah should help the parties communicate clearly and should avoid writing vague repair obligations that create uncertainty. Mike asked Sarah, "Do you think the flashing actually needs to be replaced?" That's not Sarah's call. Sarah is a real estate licensee. She's not a roofer. She can help Mike understand what the buyer requested. She can recommend that he obtain information from an appropriate roofing professional. She can help manage contractual deadlines and communications. What she shouldn't do is climb onto the roof, look at the flashing, and announce, "Tom's wrong. That's perfectly fine." The same principle applies to the electrical concern. Don't become an electrician. The HVAC concern, don't become an HVAC technician. Water intrusion, don't become a mold specialist, engineer, roofer, or building envelope expert because you've sold a lot of houses. Know enough to recognize when another professional should be involved. Mike and Jennifer obtain additional information and estimates. Some items are relatively minor. Others require more discussion. Sarah reviews the contractual options with them within her competence and helps them communicate their response through the appropriate documents. Mike asks, "Do we have to agree to everything?" Sarah explains that the seller's obligations depend on the actual contract and the buyer's notice. The seller shouldn't assume every buyer request is automatically mandatory simply because it appears on an inspection notice. Likewise, Mike shouldn't assume he can ignore the contractual process because he doesn't like the requests. This is why agents need to understand the contractual procedure and deadlines. After discussing the issues, Mike and Jennifer agree to several repairs and negotiate the remaining concerns with David. Then Jennifer asks an excellent question. If we fix the window leak, do we still have to tell anybody about it? Here's the bigger lesson. Repair does not erase history. The fact that a condition has been repaired may be important information. So may the fact that the condition existed in the first place. Sarah and the Reynolds should consider their continuing disclosure obligations based on the facts, applicable Arizona requirements, and the transaction documents. Now imagine this transaction falls apart tomorrow. David cancels under a contractual right, and the Reynolds home returns to the market. Can Sarah take everything learned during the inspection, put the report in a drawer, and pretend none of it happened? That's dangerous thinking. If Sarah or the Reynolds now possesses information about a material property condition, that information may affect future disclosure obligations, even though David is no longer buying the house. This is why experienced brokers tell agents the BINSR may resolve a repair request. It does not erase what you learned about the property. The Reynolds move forward with the agreed repairs. They keep invoices and documentation. Sarah updates the transaction file and continues tracking the contractual deadlines. For a few days, things become quiet. Mike starts feeling confident again. Then Sarah receives another call from Daniel. This time, it isn't about the inspection. The appraisal came back. Sarah pauses, and Daniel says $605,000. The Reynolds are under contract for $615,000. Mike is about to learn that the buyer and seller can agree on a price, but that doesn't mean the lender's appraisal will support it. That's where we'll go in section 19. The appraisal comes in low. What happens to the deal now? Online discussion 1. Mike wants Sarah to immediately promise that the sellers will fix everything requested after the inspection. Why should Sarah slow the process down? Answer. Repair language can create contractual obligations, and vague promises may lead to disagreements about what work is required or what constitutes completion. Sarah should help the Reynolds understand the buyer's requests, contractual options, deadlines, and available professional information before they agree to repair terms. 2. Tom identifies moisture near the upstairs window after Jennifer previously reported water in the same area following a monsoon. Why is this important beyond the inspection negotiation? Answer. The information may have disclosure significance because Sarah and the Reynolds now have additional knowledge concerning a potential property condition. The buyer's discovery does not automatically eliminate the seller's or licensee's continuing disclosure responsibilities. The condition should be addressed according to the facts, contract, Arizona requirements, and brokerage procedures. Third, if David cancels and the Reynolds property returns to the market, can Sarah simply disregard everything learned from the inspection? Answer, no. Information learned during the failed transaction may remain relevant, particularly if it concerns a known adverse material fact or material defect. Sarah and the sellers should evaluate continuing disclosure responsibilities and update transaction documentation rather than treating cancellation as though the information was never discovered.